Hello, everybody. My name is Cassandra Cassiopeia, and I am here as host of the Sedona Astrology Club alongside Kaitlyn Turner and Lynn Bell. And we're getting on here today to talk about Lynn's incredible upcoming workshop in Sedona, June 13th and 14th. And the purpose of this Zoom is really to introduce your work, Lynn, to our audience. And so we'd love to have you just introduce what got you into astrology and what's your
Oh,
astrology to teach.
that's a long story, but I got interested in astrology when I was very young. I think I started reading horoscopes in the newspaper, and I started collecting people's signs. So by the time I was 13, I knew the birth dates of everyone in my class. I didn't know, I tried to find their birth times, but I couldn't. But at that time, astrological information was rare. So it was really on the very first level for a long time. And even when I hunted information, it was hard to find. I
Did
like
you
it.
even know to ask people for their birthdays?
Well, books, books started appearing because of the age of Aquarius, because there was a mega conjunction of planets in the 60s, which launched a mini renaissance in astrology. And so people started to get interested. And anyway, I got very curious, but I think what I had a mind that needed to organize reality differently than other people. I was seeing things or feeling things, and I didn't have any reference system for that. So astrology became you could say, my earliest and permanent form, but I never expected to be an astrologer. And so it was probably when I was in my mid 20s that one day I sat down after going back and forth, after learning how to do readings, after being obsessed. I suddenly said, okay, I'm an astrologer. Okay, I accept. And I went to school, I went to graduate school for a doctorate in literature, so, and I just dropped out to pursue esoteric studies. That's me. So one of those people.
Wow, it's incredible. And so, back then, was psychological astrology, was it termed that way, or was that a
No, I would say um, that when I'd already been interested in astrology in a long time. And when Liz Green's first book came out and I read it, I thought, this is what I do. Or Stephen Arroyo's first book. And it was, yes. But until then, it was sort of like trying to find your way through this very arcane language and very limited descriptions, really. The literature in astrology was really limited. So the way that I learned is I started, I put a sign up in the local co-op offering readings for a very small sum of money. And I would learn from every chart I did. And I would say, okay, why? The books say this, but this isn't true. Why not? So that's really how I grew into astrology, sort of by asking a lot of questions and observing and working with people, especially.
you're got multiple planets in Gemini, isn't that right?
Yeah, yes, that's right.
We're good at asking a lot of questions.
Yes, yes, that's right.
Yeah.
How did you find your way into the mythology of it all? How did that come on board?
I'd always been interested in mythology, and I think even as a child, I grew up in the library, and the things I loved most were fairy tales and adventures and myths. I mean, I just devoured all that stuff. Um, so it was very much part of, I think it, and I also read many, many novels. When I was young, I started reading the library from A to Z. I think I got to M and got bored, but so I stopped. I was just like, no, I'm not going to read any more by this author. I don't like them. But so I had that devouring kind of mentality. And I know what I like. I liked stories that gave a sort of deeper meaning or showed the soul's journey in some way. So Liz, of course, was the first person who integrated myth and astrology because she was a Jungian analyst. But I read Jung already as an undergrad, and I was a dreamer. And so I was very much into, I dreamt all the time. Now, I can't say I do that now, but, I had technicolor, very powerful symbolic. So the whole idea of symbolic thinking and hunting that down and seeing where it came from was there very early. Yeah. So.
That might be a good segue into why myth can be really supportive for people in their journeys. So part of the day one of this workshop is all to do with grief in its different forms that are told about in these ancient stories. And yeah, one of our questions was just like, how can that help somebody? Like why go into myth?
Yeah, I think that when we live in experience and have nothing to make sense of it, um, to understand it as a larger pathway for the soul, because that's what the myth offers. The myth offers, in a way, both the anguish and the the pain of loss, which most of us, if you're really lucky, if you've never experienced this, but if you've never lost a love or a person you've been close to, count your blessings. But we all say goodbye to things, and the way we respond to that, and whether we say goodbye willingly or not, is very individual, and it can seem that there's only the void. Whereas the myths tell us that this is part of what it means to be a human being, and that it's part of what's been known about our path for thousands of years, really. These are not new stories. They're stories that have stayed with us for a very long time.
Yeah, so in the essential aloneness that we can feel, it gives us more of a connection to a universal and shared experience that can
Yeah.
be somewhat comforting.
Yeah. I don't know if you've ever been to Epidaurus. So in Greece, there's a healing center where there was a theater called Epidaurus, but it was also the place where Asclepius brought people to heal, and people would go and they would ask the gods for a healing dream. They would go and they would stay for 9 nights. But next to this, and they would have herbs and diagnostics and all kinds of things. But in Epidaurus, it's a great theater.
Mm.
And in the theater, they would enact the great mythic plays, Greek tragedies, because theater was also a way of, there's this word catharsis, which is what happens when you live the powerful emotions through someone else, this story, you yourself have that powerful emotional experience, and we might, I don't think Netflix is quite the same, although, so many things that we're watching or seeing have these elements.
Mm. Such an interesting concept
Mm, mm,
for so many reasons, really. It just seems like we have access to a level of healing in our sleep that we may not have in our conscious mind. Like and our body reacts, like our physical body will respond to our dreams just as if it happened in real life sometimes. So there is a really beautiful healing that can happen in those liminal spaces.
and myth is also irrational. It has a shape and a form that isn't about logic or trying to figure it out or what should happen. It takes you into a process, and very often you don't know where you're going. And it is, and in that process, all kinds of things start to happen. So as we explore these very ancient tales, let's say, something happens internally that doesn't happen when you're just trying to explain something with your ordinary mind, which doesn't work a lot of the time anyway.
Would
I think,
you would you
sorry.
look at the myths as alive, like these living energies that then
Yeah.
we take in and they work with us in some way?
Yeah, I think so. I think we do. And I think for example, very successful modern stories like The Matrix have become, or The Lord of the Rings, those have become living myths as well. People are referring to them, even, new technology companies are called after objects in The Lord of the Rings, so they've clearly come in and become part of the mythic stream. Um, and I think great works stay alive in us. Yeah. And which ones a particular culture chooses to coalesce about is a mystery, but it's the ones we need.
And there's so many myths, right? And
Right.
so how did you pick the three that you'll be talking about?
Well, I think um, they all have the feminine at the center. That is, although they're not only for women, but I always find it interesting. Freud worked with the Oedipal myth, for example. So everybody knows about that. Um, and many people, a lot of work was done on the myth of the hero. But those that touch the feminine in societies where women, in a way, were mute, were not seen as the actors, I think they have a huge amount of power for both men and women to address those parts of ourselves that are less known, less obvious.
Maybe the feminine, the unconscious, the depths,
Yeah,
darkness.
yeah.
Mhm. I'm personally so excited for this workshop.
That's fantastic. I
Yeah,
love that.
the description on the website that you wrote, it's so moving. And obviously through your lived experience and all of your client work, it's just such a
Mm,
rich
mm,
resource to be able to have you share with us.
yeah. And I love, I'm one of the myths I'm going to touch on is Ariadne. And I've been both to Knossos. I mean, the labyrinth doesn't exist anymore, but in my personal practice, I've walked the labyrinth many times in Chartres. And the whole idea of encountering the monster at the center, which both men and women had to do, by the way, in the myth. It was the youth that were sent in. And what happens after that? So there's a myth that tells us a lot. Also, there's a lot of resonance with family stories, which is also one of the things I love to work on. So.
How are you going to work with people in their own charts and in their own lives? Like, obviously, there's going to be a lecture piece, but then we're going to do more of a group and hands-on learning.
Yes, I mean, I'll ask people to give me their charts
Mhm.
or give you their charts so they can be prepared and maybe printed out. I don't know if that's possible. Um, and which will certainly be important for the second day, which is the Venus workshop, okay, where we're really looking specifically at something that has astrological context, because the way that when we deal with grief and loss, we're often looking at particular periods in our chart, particular initiations, you could say.
Mm.
What are the moments of our initiations into a larger emotional knowing? And so we'll probably be looking at that timing a little bit. I mean, without going into a huge amount of technical analysis. And I think it's very individual that an individual, it's not the same thing for each person to know what was going on in their life at a particular moment. When does that suddenly the ground beneath your feet open up and you had no idea that would happen?
Yeah, so we're going to get to implement, directly look at people's Venusian
Mhm.
timeline. Are we focusing primarily on Venus to see?
Especially in day two, we'll focus on the kind of Venus we have and the aspects we have. And one of the reasons of doing that is because I think all of us have had moments in our lives where something gets stuck, and in that stuckness, there's an over adaptation. There's a kind of um, like a glitch.
Hmm.
And it creates interference with our sense of self, identity, our relationships, who we want to be, who we want to be with. These glitches that are part of perhaps traumas that have happened earlier in our lives. Like, how do we deal with that? And how do they get woven into other parts of our story that we're not even aware of? So I think that's going to be an interesting bridge between the 2 days.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah. So we'll have a really specific uh, chart work in day two.
Okay. I like the description of the bridge, and yeah, you had m mentioned like when we're touched by grief, like there can be almost like a small blackening in that place
Mhm.
of where Venus might sit and how we relate.
Mm. Yeah, I like that word blackening. I don't know if that was my word, but you made it an even better word.
I heard you.
Yeah, there can be a blackening. There can be, it's like a little, Conrad wrote this book called The Heart of Darkness.
Hmm.
And um, which is about very different things, but it is about that. I think when we experience things that are difficult, there can stay that little place in us, and we're not even aware of it. Almost like how it is a sort of, I don't know if I want to say a creative center, but it's a place that generates events and responses without us being having consciously chose them.
Yeah, this is a incredible way that psychological astrology and using the myth can be so healing, I think.
Yeah.
It's speaking to people's experiences in a way that other traditions of astrology might, you know,
Mhm.
not have the same tools to access.
Right. And it's a very, and people will really, sometimes these spontaneously come up in client work. So those who do astrology, I think will find them really useful to see how, um, especially in the psyche myth, there are certain signs that are really strongly indicated and spoken to, and very different ones in the Ariadne myth. So, and in Demeter and Persephone, we're dealing with different signs. One of the reasons we want to look at all of those is, in a way, they're touching different experiences of human consciousness and being,
Mhm.
and waking up, also different resources.
Mm.
Because the unconscious kind of takes up resources by like holding on to the pain or the.
It does, or it deviates them into strange shapes and modes of behavior.
That's
Like
reality.
overdoing something that doesn't lead you to where you want to go. Like you get too much of this and not enough of that. That can be one way, because it's the, this is a complicated, complex subject, but we all, once we've had something happen to us, there's an automatic way to protect us from it happening again.
Mhm.
I mean, and obviously there are situations you can't protect yourself from. uh,
Mhm.
I but uh, those early protections can end up being, like a set of clothes that are too small for us. Right? And so the myth helps us take those off and go back to another state.
Mhm. I think that's the beautiful thing of story because it does it in this like almost playful, whimsical, artful way, but you're really actually doing deep psychological work.
Of course. Of
Yeah.
course you are. Yeah. And especially when you yourself have had that experience and are connected to it when you're working, when you're being in the presence of others and willing to be open.
Mm.
So, which is what we hope will happen in these workshops. Because there is something, the wonderful thing, I'm teaching on Zoom tomorrow and I'm getting ready for that workshop, and it's great. My brain is ticking overtime, but working with other people is so rich and so wonderful because we all nourish each other and share with each other. As you know, that's why your team organizes events.
Yeah, we really value the in-person connection, and getting to learn from a teacher directly just has such a different transmission,
It does.
nonverbal as well. And so this is a really unique opportunity to get to learn from you in this small setting with your own charts and to ask as many
Yeah.
questions. And it's a super big treat.
Well, I don't know if it's as many questions.
It's like, no,
we might want to narrow expect, but
yeah,
certainly to ask questions, yeah.
yeah.
Mm. And to make as much space as we can for people's deep questioning.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's nice we realize that we all kind of go through the same things, but in our own way.
Yeah. And we go through, and yes, and we do not everybody goes through the same things, but we each have paths that have similarities, but some people's are really different, and not, I mean, maybe there is some similarity with people who are in the same geographical place. Like, how did I get here? There is a story. I'm sure there's an origin story, just like there is here where I live in Paris.
Mm. Or like an archetypal thread.
Yeah, an archetypal thread. Mm. Mm.
Do you work with asteroids at all, Lynn, to
I
help?
do, and I probably will this weekend because I think they'll be important in some of the myths that we're doing. Um, and I put them, sometimes I don't, and sometimes I put Vesta in every chart, and sometimes I put Ceres in every chart. And but I love to work initially with clients with the basic chart and then open it up. And for some people, it's so fundamental to have the asteroid. So fantastic. So I know that in your group, that's a place of real interest, isn't it?
For sure, yeah. But I bet it's interesting when when you're talking to somebody in a consultation, you're hearing them tell a story of their lives. Do you get these like little intuitive hits
Of course.
where you're like, I hear that story. Like I remember
Yeah.
that story. And then it like clues you in, maybe I'll pop that asteroid on. Like, does that
I
happen?
need to look at this. Yeah.
Yeah.
We need to look at this. There's something here, or we need to talk about what's configured here. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I'm, yeah, I love when recently I've been putting all the asteroids in, and then when I do certain things, I have to take them out. So that's really because um, but they'll certainly be part of this weekend.
Very exciting.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to being with everyone. It's going to be an amazing weekend, I think.
Yeah, thank you so much for visiting us. We're so excited.
Well, thank you for inviting me. What an opportunity to come.
Yeah, it's really beautiful here. And go ahead, Caitlin.
Have you been to Sedona or Arizona, Lynn?
I've been, there was an ISA conference in Tucson.
Mm.
I want to say that was 2017. And then I did go through Sedona on that trip. And I think I've been through, I came once when, yeah, I've kind of been through at
Mhm.
different times. Mm.
Yeah. Well, it's gonna be gorgeous. We have the creek and it's a quieter time of year in Sedona. It's really beautiful for early morning hiking. So, before the workshop, it's a good time to get fresh air and enjoy the trails and then come in and do the
Mm,
studies with us.
fantastic.
Hmm.
It sounds great.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your time, Lynn, and thank you, Kaitlyn, for jumping on here.
Thank, thank you, Kaitlyn. Thank you, Cassie. That's going to be great to see both of you.
Yeah.